Okay, good evening. Welcome to the school committee meeting. It's 6:01, so I will call this meeting to order. Welcome to the school committee meeting of March 12th, 2026. This meeting will be conducted in a hybrid format. All members are here in person, but some of our guests may join us remotely. We will have a roll call to confirm we have a quorum. Kelly, we'll start with you tonight.
Percio here.
Adler here.
Wiseman here.
Loomis here.
Hamilton here.
This meeting is open to the public and will be broadcast by ECAT. Tonight we will have our annual hearing on the fiscal 27 budget. During the hearing, anyone here in person will have the opportunity to ask questions or provide comments on the fiscal year 27 budget. We will have a public comment period later in the agenda, which is separate from the budget hearing comment period. I will review the parameters for that later in the meeting. So next item on the agenda is student representative to the school committee update, which we do not have tonight. So next item, we have a vote on the donation of blankets. Tonight we have Anne-Marie Taylor to discuss donating the beautiful throws to the OA senior class.
So hi everyone, my name is Anne-Marie Taylor. Last year I was on the Tricentennial Committee and we donated throws to the class of 2025. That committee has been disbanded because the Tricentennial year is over, but a couple of us wanted to continue this tradition. So we got private donations, and this is the blanket that we would like approval on. This came today. It's the only one woven so far. We're seeking the school committee's approval so we can order blankets for every graduating senior in Easton, whether it be Oliver Ames, private or homeschooled, as we did last year. And as you can see, it says, congratulations, class of 2026. And we did a little thing here. We put the hands of the clock, the shovels, at 2:26. So that's what we're here for tonight, so we can get them all ready and pass them out at class night, and then, of course, all of you will get one.
Thank you. Committee members, anyone want to comment or have any questions?
This is so generous, so above and beyond generous. Yeah.
It was amazing. What an amazing memory for them. I love it.
Okay, great. So I will, did somebody else, Jim, did you want to say something? Okay. So I'll take a motion to approve the donation of the blankets for the OA class of 2026.
So moved, Loomis?
A second?
Percio, second.
All in favor? Great, thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
That's really cool.
It's nice to start out like that, isn't it?
I know. We should start every meeting on a note of positivity.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love that too. Okay, next item on the agenda are the minutes. So first we have the regular session minutes of January 8th, 2026. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or edits? Okay, then I will take a motion to approve the minutes of January 8th, 2026.
So moved, Percio.
Second, Loomis?
All in favor? Great. Next are the minutes of January 29th, 2026. I am going to make a motion to table these minutes. Do I have a second?
Percio, second.
All in favor? Okay. Next are the executive session minutes of January 29th, 2026. I'm going to make a motion to table these minutes as well. Do I have a second?
Second, Loomis?
All in favor? And finally are the executive session minutes of February 2nd, 2026. Does anyone want these minutes held? Okay, then I will take a motion to approve but not release the executive session minutes of February 2nd, 2026.
So, go ahead.
So moved, Loomis?
Second?
Percio, second.
All in favor? Thank you.
February 2nd? I'm sorry. On the agenda,
the one that I have, it says the executive session minutes are February 12th and January 29th.
Right. Oh, I did the wrong date. Sorry about that.
Okay.
My misprint. So we're going to do that again. I will take a motion to approve but not release the minutes of February 12th, 2026.
So moved, Percio.
Second,
Second, Loomis.
all in favor? Thank you, Mrs. Pruitt, for pointing that out. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the discussion of school committee protocols and possible votes. So at the last time we discussed this, there had been a request to add some language to item number 10. So it's underlined, and I just want to make sure this is the language that you're all comfortable with. Or if there's any change you want to make to the language.
Yes, that's correct. That's what I was looking for.
Is that okay with everyone? Okay, then I will take a motion to approve the school committee operating protocols.
So moved, Percio.
Do I have a second?
Second, Loomis.
All in favor? Great. I will ask Director Ramos to put these on the website. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 27 budget hearing. Tonight is the public hearing on the fiscal year 27 budget. We will start with the budget presentation. After the presentation, the school committee members will have opportunity to ask questions and make comments. After that, we will allow for questions and comments on the fiscal year 27 budget from anyone here in person. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment at that time, please raise your hand and we will call on you. We ask everyone to keep their comments to 3 minutes, and please make sure to state your name and address for the record. Dr. Cabral?
Thank you. So Director Spagna is here this evening as well. He will join me. We have a PowerPoint presentation to share with you on the proposal for the FY27 budget. So before we ask you to move to the audience, just a point of technical clarification. Hearing the meeting from this vantage point, which I don't usually, someone's microphone in particular is making it that it's very difficult to hear the rest of you when you're speaking. So I want to remind you that if the microphone part of it is touching any clothing, it will make interference. So I just wanted to remind you about that and then invite you to please be in the audience for our presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we just temporarily switch?
Make sure you turn it on, and then here's a clicker for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just turn it on by pushing.
Yep. And when it's green, it has to be green. Okay. You're welcome.
We good?
Okay, Mr. Spagna, all set?
I think I'm ready.
Okay. So thank you for your attention this evening as we bring forward the FY27 budget. As the school committee is aware, every year we have this published and publicized meeting so that the public can engage in the budget process for the upcoming school year. There have been a few differences this year in light of the recent developments and the fact that the town is entertaining options for overrides this year. So the timetable has been a little bit different. But just to begin, I'd like to orient us in our definitions and our typical timeline and how it may have differed this year before Mr. Spagna starts to discuss our cost drivers and explanation of budget pressures. And then we will take the rest of presentation from there. So the first slide, if you can advance to the budget target framework slide, please.
Are you seeing it?
No, sorry. There we go. Great. Thank you. I just want to make sure the audience can see it. I have the slides in front of me, but I want to make sure those on Zoom are able to see it okay. So these are these are the framework definitions that we have been using in our conversations with the public, also with staff. They go from strategic down to regressive. You can see the definitions for each of the targets, and we do ask staff when we review what the needs are. If when we're looking at our strategic plan and we're looking at the needs of our students, and if we see any achievement gaps or gaps in where our goals are headed, the trajectory of our goals, we take a look at any resources that may be helpful in helping to close achievement gaps or reach our goals, and these are the definitions that we use. You will remember also that for most of the 13 years that I've been in the district anyway, we have been in a reactive or essential budget, which simply means that we provide staff and resources as a reaction to current needs, potentially mandates, potentially shifts in the law or requirements from the Department of Education or other organizations. 2 of those years, we have also been regressive. Last year, of course, was one of those. That's when we get to a point that we are reducing or eliminating staff or resources. It can affect programming. It can affect staffing, of course. We had reduced staff last year, and it can reduce materials. And so as we were regressive last year in FY26, the last time we presented this budget, we are shifting slightly this time to being reactive essential once again. And we had already announced to the public and to staff that we were very hopeful, cautiously optimistic that we would not need to eliminate any positions, major programs, or resources materials this year. We're still on that trajectory as of tonight. And so this is going to be presented as a reactive or essential budget. The next slide shows our process and our considerations. And you can see every year we start with our strategic plan. We have a relatively new strategic plan that we're working out of now, which can be found on our website. We use that strategic plan to see where we need to bring students, what our goals are as a district. That typically starts in December and January, but this year started in the fall, again, because of the aggressive timeline to get information out to people with plenty of time to consider before the school committee votes on the budget, and then members of the community vote on the budget. However, it does bring us to our public presentation quadrant at the upper left, which is typically from March until May. This year it will be March, and we will culminate in April when we present to the joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Select Board, which will be at the beginning of April. And then the next slide, we have the FY27 proposed cost drivers that I will ask Director Spagna to begin explaining to you.
Thank you, Dr. Cabral. We thought it was important before we go into the full budget to highlight some of the and gain some understanding around the primary factors that are influencing the 27 budget. On this slide, the first item you'll see is the contractual salary obligations. They continue to affect the budget through negotiated agreements and step and lane movements. These are recurring commitments that we have to plan for every year. Another area is we are anticipating or seeing right now a reduction in our minimum state aid. Last year, that was based on $150 per pupil. This year, the governor's initial proposed budget is down to $75 per pupil. But I have to say it's very early in the process. We probably won't have a final number closer towards the end of the year, what that'll actually be. With any hopes, it'll be higher so the revenue can be brought back up to the town. We're also monitoring federal grant funding. As you know, these fluctuate from year to year, and the final award amount really won't be known and probably until after this budget is set and done. So hopefully we won't see a lot of change, and we'll talk about some concerns that we're seeing as we get further into the budget. But on a positive time, there are several areas that are stabilized or decreased. Transportation costs have been aligned to the contract performance. Reliance on contracted nursing has declined based on our projected need. Unemployment costs have normalized, and certain one-time expenses from FY26, such as retirement incentives, are not reoccurring in FY27. So together, these pressures and adjustments provide important context for what we're proposing for FY27.
I would just remind the school committee and the public that the state minimum aid statutorily is $30 per student. So it could honestly vary anything from $30 to the most we ever saw was last year at $150. So that is, and it's of course multiplied by the number of students in the district. So that is a number that is, like a lot of numbers in the budget, it is mercurial, but we are watching it and we will keep you updated. In terms of the stabilization and adjustments, I just want to also remind you that that transportation cost adjustment, when we're making these educated and informed by longitudinal data, we're making decisions based on that with things that are mercurial. One example of that is for students who become part of DCF custody or families that have homes instability. That is a transportation that is mandatory for the district. And so that had been steadily increasing, if you remember, the last few years, steadily increasing. And so we had allocated a little bit more in that line. And then for the first time this year, it then decreased. Again, it's something that's difficult to predict, and it can be quite costly and expensive. So it is something we're watching. I'm bringing it up just in case some of these things that we're saying are stabilization and adjustments, that they're as stable as they can be right now. Next year, if you see a spike in McKinney-Vento, you may go over your transportation line slightly and something else could go down. The same thing of the elimination of one-time costs for the incentive and unemployment. Unemployment can vary. And same thing with the contracted services. Contracted services would be if a student is at an out-of-district placement and they need a one-to-one nurse. We are responsible, the district is responsible for paying for that. So you can see where those costs could fluctuate. We are being conservative with those projections, putting in enough based on past trends, but they can vary. And so you may see a little bit of that next year.
So as we take a quick look at the entitlement grants, the federal funding and some of the sources. As you know, they support student population and some programmatic needs. As I stated before, the allocations can change from year to year and based on federal and state policy decisions. So we really don't know where we're going to be yet. We can just make the best guess at this point in time. We try to treat these funds as supplemental rather than relying on them to support core operations. However, some services are supported through these grants. So if funding is to decline significantly in the future, the district would need to identify other resources to maintain those supports. And we have some concerns around the Title I funding. We just got notified I think it was last week, that the poverty level overall in the district has dropped below a certain threshold at 3%, which is good. That means poverty's down, if the numbers are correct, and we're looking at that. Chrissy's going to look forward to that too. But in that happening, we risk losing all title funding. And if that's the case, that's about a $350,000 adjustment that we'd have to find other funding sources for to maintain the services that provides.
So if I could jump in here. So last week with our call with the commissioner, we were informed that our Title I funding at the federal level was level funded. However, Massachusetts is receiving a decrease because our federal poverty level has decreased significantly, which is great. for Massachusetts. But what that means is that we are about $30 million short in Massachusetts for Title I funding. That also means that that then rolls down to the districts. We were presented with notification last week of Title I funding projections for FY27, and the Easton Public Schools had a federal rate of 5.37, I think it was, this past year, which left us Title I funding, as you can see on the slide, at $346,126. And we are estimated to go down to 2.97, which, because we are under 3%, we are at risk of losing all Title I funds, including potentially more entitlement grants. So as you can understand, there is extreme concern around that because that is a nice portion, and it also directly targets our intervention program, which we just cannot risk losing. It's important to note that, and we've shared this in the past, our Title I funds traditionally go up and down because we do hover around a certain percentage. And when some years we'll see where Title I funding will be cut in half, some years we'll see it doubled. So the year prior to this year, so last year, our Title I funding was about just over 150,000. So you'll see how it does fluctuate. So we don't necessarily always rely on that, but we do rely on it for funding, about 8 of our interventionists. So we are extremely concerned and watching that very closely. So just so you are aware of that.
We were confounded a bit because in meeting with the commissioner last week, he said that we should be comfortable with an 85% projection. And if we got more, it would be fine. What we didn't know was that we could lose it altogether. So we did receive a list of all of the communities in the state and who was in an area of warning. And I am contacting colleagues to discuss that. As we've discussed before, the poverty rate is dictated by the census, which is why we always encourage people to complete that. It just seems highly unlikely in our experience that Easton's poverty rate would fall from 5.8-ish to 2.8 in 1 year. That is more of a jump than we've ever seen. They may be using new metrics. The state said they did ask the federal government to review it, but we are looking into that. And I just want to make a comment about the interventionists. While there is concern and we do need to pay attention to it, we are absolutely committed to the intervention program because we have seen great gains for our students. And avoiding even higher costs and maybe misplacing students in special education. And it's been highly advantageous to the students. And so you will see elsewhere in this budget where we are starting to leverage different revolving accounts. If we had to do that, we could do it for a short time. But you would definitely be notified in advance, and we would make sure that if we were shifting funds, that you would understand where they were coming from, what it might affect, what it might not affect. But I just want to make sure that while those grants currently fund interventionists, it doesn't necessarily mean if someone sees in the news or we announce that we don't have Title I, it doesn't mean that we immediately wouldn't have interventionists. We still have the latitude to move things into other grants, use revolving accounts where appropriate, and potentially move interventionists into the operating budget if we move something else to a different kind of grant. So I just want to make sure that people stay engaged and understand that we would certainly not be excited to hear that we don't have the funding, but we would get right back to the table, sharpen our pencils, move some things around. It may have an impact, but not necessarily what a grant is directly funding at any given moment. But we'll make sure we explain that if we need to, if that happens, and we will keep you all abreast of where we would funnel those really important funds.
And just to share the exact numbers, because I do have them here right now, currently this year we are at a 5.85% poverty rate for fiscal year 26, and the census is predicting that we will be next year 2.97%, but DESI is predicting 2.8%. So, of course, we will be challenging those numbers and asking for further information, and we'll bring that to you.
Director Spagna?
Yes. The budget this year, we are doing a capital request of $250,000. This is basically to support technology replacement on our planned cycle. It maintains the existing condition, prevents large future spikes, and ensures students have consistent access to instructional tools. It's very important that we stay on top of this because we don't want to be hit with repair or replacement costs because we didn't maintain the fleet that we have. So it's important, I think, that we put this request in and we get our technology maintained properly.
We also, you remember from our last meeting, asked you to support an operational facilities review. We should have that in a couple of months. That will help with the capital requests going forward from next year and beyond, because while the maintenance and custodial staffs and the DPW are amazing, they don't repeatedly go and assess the life of all of every single air ventilation unit, the floor tiles, literally every part of a building. This review will do that. And so the projections for 5-year capital budgets will be based on up-to-date information. We haven't had a review like that until the Doran Whittier report, which I believe was around 2014, 15-ish. So this will be really great going forward for capital requests. They will be based from engineers that will be giving us this information. It will be presented to you, of course.
All right, so if we take a look at the FY27 budget in total right now, as a summary, the total amount is $50,096,817. This reflects a $1.4 million reduction from FY26. Salaries remain level based on the updated personnel supplement. Fringe costs decreased due to one-time expenses not recurring, and contracted services were carefully reviewed and adjusted. This is a very lean budget. It does position the district on stable financial footing for FY27, but again, it's based on current assumptions that we're making now. Things could change. We'll take a little bit closer look at each one of these categories as we go forward. For salaries, it represents the largest portion of the district budget. It's totaling approximately $40,500,000 in FY27. It's essentially level funded next year. This reflects the updated personnel supplement, as I said, and aligns staffing to current positions. Within the level funding, the budget absorbs all contractual step and lane movements that are under the existing agreements, as well as a modest increase reserved in preparation for the ongoing union negotiations. These adjustments have effectively absorbed the salary increase that we saw in FY26, allowing for the overall salary line to remain stable. The proposal maintains current staffing levels and does not include additional workforce reductions based on current projections. However, if negotiated agreements ultimately exceed the amount reserved in budget, that difference would increase overall cost and could require adjustments in future staffing or spending. You can also see that over 38 of our total full-time equivalents, a total full-time equivalency for the district is 495. 38 of those positions are being offset next year with entitlement grants and revolving funds. This adjustment and funding source for those positions help to support the overall budget reduction that we're presenting to you for FY27 today. We take a look at fringe benefits. The overall reduction in fringe benefits that you see is primarily the result of removing one-time FY26 costs, including retirement incentives and the elevated unemployment expense. There is no reduction in employee benefits, important to point that out. So that's mainly that's pretty much most of the reason for that reduction, those one-time costs being removed and adjusted.
Fortunately, we had initially predicted that we would have layoffs for 2 years in a row. With that not having to be the case this year, we are able to lower unemployment and retirement incentives, which is very advantageous to the budget, as you can see. And the cell phone, I just want to clarify, that is not any additional cell phones or any charges. It is just moving as Joe is continuing to align some of the DESI codes that changed. He just took different places where cell phones were in the budget and moved them to the one line that shows 18,800. So it's not an increase in benefits, it's just moving them to different appropriate lines.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. And that's throughout the budget. That'll be ongoing. You'll see some adjustments as we go forward. So for contracted services, very similar to fringe and salary, contracted services reflect areas where we were able to align costs more closely with actual operations. Transportation costs were aligned to the actual contract performance. Contract nursing, which is not our nursing staff, it's just the contracted services that we go with for the kids that have need, was reduced based on projected need. We also will be prepaying $500,000 in out-of-district tuition this year and applying over $1.3 million in special education offsets to manage placement costs. And we'll go a little further into that too. If we take a look at our out-of-district placements and how that'll work, while these offsets help to reduce the operating budget, they rely heavily on grant and revolving funds that are limited in duration and cannot serve as a long-time solution. You can see that our total out-of-district placement tuitions are projected to be over $3.1 million next year. By prepaying tuitions and shifting costs to revolving and grant funds, we're able to reduce the impact on the operating budget down to $1.3 million. Again, this is, I have to stress, it's a one-time allocation that we're doing this. It can't be a long-term solution, and I'll give you an example as to why that is on the next slide. This chart shows us the projected out-of-district placement costs compared to the balance in our special education revolving fund, because that's one of the vehicles we're going to be using to offset some of the expenses to our operating fund. In FY27, we're using revolving funds and circuit breaker revenue to offset placements in order to manage the overall budget. While this approach helps balance the budget in the short term, it does rely on reserves that are limited and fluctuate from year to year. Over the long term, continued reliance on the revolving fund can reduce the balance available to respond to future placement changes, which can occur quickly depending on student need and unexpectedly. This projection is based on several assumptions, including current placement levels and anticipated tuition increases. Plus, the model assumes approximately a 2% annual growth in revenue into this fund and about 2.5% annual growth related to expenses, which is pretty typical of tuition adjustments in these specialized programs. Because placement decisions are driven by student need and legal requirements, costs can vary from year to year depending on enrollment and service needs. But based on these assumptions, you can see that the available funding would take us right into FY 2028, and then we'd be in a deficit position. So at that point in time, if we exhausted all these funds, any unexpected or anticipated costs that we did not budget for would fall directly back into the operating budget or other funding sources if they're available. So we need to be careful. Doing these one-time use to get us through FY27 and normalize our budget a little bit is okay, but we can't rely on it year over year.
Director Spagna explained that perfectly, but I do want to punctuate it for a moment because it is very important. And we use this red font, honestly, as a visual between this slide and the last slide, because we know that people have been concerned about the budget and if the school department needs funding in an override or needs funding to help keep supports and services for kids in schools. This is an exact example of that. So while there are revolving accounts, you can see, and we really want to make sure, again, I'm belaboring this slide, these are not long-term fixes. And I know that we have explained that in the past, but it definitely bears, it's worth repeating that obviously we cannot go below zero. You can't go into a deficit in a revolving account. And so while we meet the 2027 projection, and you can see Compared to the cost of special education, the amount that is in the revolving account is really quite small and is there to assist us should we have an outplacement or several that we didn't anticipate. You cannot do the same thing in FY28 and certainly not in FY29. That will be completely expended. And so we do have an upcoming presentation on all revolving accounts, and we will show you similarly why there's money in those accounts, what they are for, and it's the same type of situation. They're not solutions, but it is important that the public knows that those are all being expended. And so when we get to that point, then not only are there reductions as there were last year, but then programs just don't continue because you have no other way of funding those. So it's very important, and I appreciate how Director Spagna explained that, but it's very important that people don't look at this as some people look at, for example, the stabilization account on the town side. Some people are very comfortable with spending that money year over year, but as Connor Reed, and I'm sure the new town administrator will be very forceful in explaining, it is very, very bad practice. And you do it really when your budget has been thinned out as much as it possibly can be, and you are extremely lean and you have no other choice. So it is going to continue, and people should know that those services are going to continue, but something has to change, I would say, within the next 2 years for the school department.
As we go into salaries, supplies and materials, the majority of this reduction is about $152,000 decrease in textbook purchases, and that's based on the principal's input and review and curriculum timing. It's not a reduction in access to instructional materials in no way. It just reflects inventory management. The need isn't there right now. They did a lot of purchasing prior, so we're in good shape and we can safely reduce those lines. Other expenses, this category reflects a modest increase in professional development, and this is one of those other areas where it's just a realignment where things were budgeted previously, moving into a consistent line of the account line that it should be in, that adjustment. There's a small adjustment in routine miscellaneous expenses that occur each year, but overall this section is a very small portion of the total budget. So I'd like to take a moment and talk about what the budget does and what the budget does not attempt to do. The budget maintains core educational services and aligns spending with current operational needs. It also manages projected costs by using available funding sources carefully and removing several one-time expenses that occurred in FY26. But at the same time, the proposal does not reduce the current workforce based on our financial projections. Of course, negotiations may impact this. It also does not expend costs associated with new initiative or restore previously deferred programs. The focus next year will be to maintain stability while continuing to manage the ongoing fiscal pressures. We want to look ahead to FY28. We always want to be a step ahead if we can be. As we look at this, we're monitoring our grant sustainability, special education costs, enrollment trends, and future contract obligations. Our goal is to remain proactive so the stability we will achieve in FY27 can continue. Planning for FY28 has already begun and will continue throughout the year, so we are well prepared for the district's needs when that arrives. So in summary, this proposal reflects disciplined financial management and reduces the overall spending. In short, 27 restores alignment, maintains staffing based on current projections, and positions the district on stable financial footing. You got to understand, like I said before, that there are variables that could impact the budget as we move into 27. For example, special education, out-of-district tuitions, and transportation. But this budget is, I want to stress this is a very lean budget. This is, usually you build a lot of contingencies within your operating budget just in case. There are very few of those in this budget. And the only reason we can do that is because we do have those other reserve funds available in case those one-time issues do arise. We have the special education revolving fund. We have circuit breaker. So we have some safety nets there. As we move forward into 28, the budget will start to include a little bit of a contingency in there to help offset in the operating fund. And I'll turn it back to Dr. Cabral.
Okay, so I have been providing this update at the end of our hearing each year because, there are two major funding sources that we receive. One, of course, is from the town, but the other is from the state, and it's part of our Chapter 70 funding. We continue to advocate legislatively for a change in the foundation formula, which we have asserted for over a decade is a flawed formula. We've gotten to the point where there is legislative agreement on that, which is a huge step forward. But there hasn't been agreement over changing that just yet. Again, we continue to work on that front. But in the meantime, I think it's important for people to understand just how much the absolute unbelievable dedicated professionals in the district are doing with the funding that the town does receive. And so this is an illustration. We've updated this. I've showed you this in the past, and each year I update it. I know it does say FY24 because this is the most current data released by DESE. And I just want to remind people, because there has been some misunderstanding about what per pupil expenditure means in the past. Some people believe that every time a student, if you can see, for example, on this, per pupil spending in Easton is $18,311 a student. Some people have misunderstood that to mean that if we have 10 students move in, then it's going to cost the district an additional $180,000, for example. That's actually not how the per pupil is estimated. It's kind of a post-mortem data point, which is why the most current is only FY24 from DESE. What they do is they look at the actual spending of every school in the Commonwealth, and then they divide that by the number of students, and that gives you your per pupil spending. So it's not, if a student moves in, we spend an additional X amount of dollars on a student. In fact, when students move in, it tends to shift the amount that is paid, the amount of per pupil spending, because it's divided amongst more students. So it is not, it doesn't hurt us when students come into the district, because there's also a part of the formula that gives you funding for every student that comes into the district. So it's far more complicated than just $18,311. And we're happy to revisit that explanation in a different meeting if people would like that explanation again. But this is an apples to apples comparison to orient people to how much we receive for the district to provide the stellar education that is provided in this district and the activities and the engagement that students have here. And so you can see that the state average is over $23,000 per year, or was in FY24. We continually use the state average, but we never, when we're reporting out on things like MCAS or achievement, or even our youth risk surveys, we never aspire to be even with the state. We always aspire to outpace the state, and we always have. However, we're doing it with a lot less funding as the average of the state. So even if we were to receive the amount of the next town over, it significantly changes what Easton would receive. Now you can see this chart says, this one is our border districts. The other is our DART districts. DART districts, again, are the districts that DESE chooses, and they can change, and they have changed over time. That's this one. These are the towns that the Department of Education compares Easton to determine our achievement and accountability. And so we outperform most of these districts, but you can see we do it with the budget that's third from the last. And the next slide is our border communities. Of course, these are communities that we are competing with for our employees, for example. And our costs are very similar because we are so close in the area, and so our expenses are similar. But you can see in this cohort, we are second from the bottom. Only behind us is Bridgewater Rainham, and I will remind people that that's a regional district, and regional districts have other funding sources for transportation, for example, and other things that we don't have that may not be reflected here. So we are quite literally at the bottom. And again, you can see that the state average far surpasses a lot of our neighbors as well, but certainly us. It's a difference of $1,883 per pupil. If we just looked to the next district next to us, which happens to be Stoughton, if we received the per pupil funding, $20,000, that would have actually been a difference of $6 million to Easton. We would actually have $6.38 million more per year to do what we do now in Easton. If we were to even go to the state average, which, as I said, we continually surpass them in every indicator, that would be an additional almost $16.5 million a year. And I just think it's important to remind people of things that we're working hard toward, is to get that foundation formula to a place that we feel is equitably distributed throughout the Commonwealth, but also to just remind people it's a good thing that we're doing. But what I try to also remind people of is that staff can get very burned out when they're doing more with less all the time. It's a very good thing to do more with less. But when we're continually doing more with even less every single year, to the tally of 16.5 million, or even if we're just looking at the next town over, 6 million, that would be a game changer for us. The devastating deficit that we took last year was a $3 million cut. So we're talking about a $6 million add. So if people have trouble sort of orienting what that means in our budget, if you look at all of the things that were reduced last year, $6 million would be that times 2 as an addition to our students and services in the town. So again, we continue to work on that. We're not going to stop working on that. But these are the kinds of things when we ask for people to help us advocate for things like a change to the foundation formula. These are the kinds of things that we're looking for, so that we can realize different totals from the Chapter 70 funding. And yes, we should be very proud of the work that everyone's doing, but we cannot have that at the expense of the professionals for the very long term, because as I said, people can burn out and people will leave the district. You can see where our neighbors were. If all of them are making that much more, you can imagine the resources that they have to offer staff as well. So it's just something that I think we need to remain mindful about as we're trying to serve our staff who serves our students. And we are happy at this point then to answer any questions that you might have about the budget.
Do we want to go back up to the table to ask questions? Or do you need the screen? Do you guys want the screen? Okay, why don't we go back up?
Thank you.
Is everyone ready? Okay, so committee questions, comments? Somebody want to start?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment that was a really great presentation, and it was very thorough, and you explained everything so well. that right now I don't have any questions.
That's a good sign. Thank you.
Jim, Pauline, Kelly?
I concur. Yeah, I concur with Lauren. Like, I don't have a lot of questions. I thought that was really, really well done and thorough. The one question I did have, you probably don't know the answer to, but do we think that the federal government may have changed some of the metrics in the census and kind of how the poverty rate is construed? Or we don't know?
That's what we're trying to find out, and we will report back to you as soon as we get that information. It does seem very unusual, so it seems more likely than not that it would be a change in metric. But again, it comes from the census, and that is always, it's a few years lag behind. So it doesn't actually represent what's happening in 2026 or 2025. It's actually a several year lag in the census.
Thank you.
Jim, do you have something?
Yes, it might be early to ask this question, but should we have an issue or not receive Title I funding, do we have a plan, or is a plan going to be drafted on where that supplement might come from our budget?
Well, we are looking at some attrition that's happening for FY27 versus the budget. There's a little bit of money there. But we're going to probably look back at some of the reserve funding that we have, see what we can offset for one time. We'll do our best to put it into the operating, and as we manage expenditures throughout the year, you could possibly build some savings in managing those costs that we could keep the funding within the operating if at all possible. But we'll have to look at that. The goal is that we don't lose all that funding.
Yeah.
So
That was kind of
As we review, when we do the presentation on the revolving accounts, that will be an opportunity to talk about that a little bit further. We can show you some specifics about where things might be able to be shifted, but also how that can only be done for a short term, and how, what the concerns that we have that the money should be used for, that then it won't be able to be used for anymore. So it isn't ideal to shift things in that way, but we do feel confident that we can continue for next year for sure. And then we can revisit certainly after we know what contract negotiations are going to mean for the years after that, but also whether we were able to receive the grant funding or not. Unfortunately, a lot of these things are unknown even before town meeting, where we actually vote on a budget. So not knowing the status of things like this is actually not that unusual for us, unfortunately. However, losing all of Title I is something we did not anticipate because that had never happened before. But as long as we don't lose all of the other entitlement grants, we certainly should be okay for next year because of the use of revolving accounts that we have. But we can give you some more detail when we do the presentation on revolving accounts as well, so you can see really exactly what we're talking about there.
perfect. And I think that just part B, is it safe to say at this point, we talked about the special education revolving fund being used. We aren't anticipating the use of any other revolving accounts at this point. Again, we just talked about that could change, but
yes, no, right now it's especially revolving and circuit breaker that's primarily being used at this point in time, not the other funds.
okay.
And revolving accounts, similar to grants in the sense that it's very specific what you can spend them on. And so part of the presentation is explaining what we can spend them on. The $250,000, I believe we currently have $250,000 in the town level revolving account for special education. Very specifically, that would be used for unanticipated tuition. So and things like that, unanticipated special education needs. So to your point, Jim, if we were to have an unanticipated tuition, it could be paid for. We have to go to the town in order to authorize the use of those funds. But if it's a $200,000 tuition, you can see that it would only be a Band-Aid for 1 year. But at least there would be a bit of warning for people to know that that had been expended.
Kelly, you have anything?
Yeah, so firstly, we talked about this when we met as a subcommittee, but I do appreciate the layout and thoroughness of the presentation. I think it gives greater clarity into something we've been seeking to get clarity on, so I appreciate it. I do have a question on the
graph that you show around the contracted services and the out-of-district spend. I know we talked about it at the subcommittee, and being able to see how we would be drawing down that special education revolving fund is very helpful. My question is actually on the out-of-district tuition expense. The numbers that are there are using the prior year kind of out-of-district tuition expense as a baseline. I know that we are making investments and decisions to move and create some programming in the district and in the buildings that will help students be able to be placed here within our district and, and be with their peers again. So in the projections that you put in for those pink bars that show us kind of the expected spend, does that account for the shift of those students? So that is a projected scenario on historical spends, but does not account for, because we don't yet know how many students might come back in. I'm learning as I go. We don't know yet how many students will come back in. That is not taking those students into consideration. So that bar for the next 2 years may not be as high as we fear due to the actions that we're taking to bring students back into
And
district
that's
and
one of
create
the
programs.
potential areas that if the programs work the way we anticipate they're going to, and I'm sure they will, there might be a little bit of room there for some, give us some of that reserve in the local budget, the operating budget that we need,
Even for next year.
even for next year.
But then again, you don't know on the flip side.
We don't know additional needs that'll come
Right,
up.
that's
Right,
right,
exactly.
right.
I'm looking at it because we're taking such a drawdown, we're leaving ourselves very little room on the special education revolving fund, which creates a significant gap as we go into the 2028 projections. And yet, we also realize that we may or may not hit the same historic numbers because we are trying to create opportunities within district.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to understand the risk profile there and see if some of our mitigations may actually be coming into play. Okay.
It's a very hard number to exactly pinpoint.
Totally.
It's a very hard number to pinpoint exactly a year out from scenarios that could come up. But Director Spagna and I ran 10-year historical data. I think the best data piece that we could give you and really talk about how our programming has impacted our budget in a positive way is from 2019 until today.
Yep.
From 2019 until today, we had 47 students out of district in FY19. The total cost for out-of-district placement was $3,373,000. We're looking at FY25 numbers as our exact numbers that we can go back to at this point. We had 25 students out of district last year. We've built a lot of programs since then. Teresa Skinner really spearheaded that work with the current assistant superintendent and superintendent that were in place, and started bringing some students back, creating opportunities for the least restrictive environment. And over that time, our overall out-of-district budget has dropped. The increase in percentage for out-of-district placement has gone up over 30% since FY19. And so the programs have done a nice job of balancing our budget, but also providing students the least restrictive environment to be educated in.
Great, thank you, that helps.
It's on the per pupil spend slides. I just want to make sure. I know that's from fiscal year 24, but the calculation of 18,311 by 3,391 students is 62.1.
Yep.
For fiscal 27, can I ask how these numbers compare if we're finalizing our current budget at 50, right around 50 million?
How is it affecting our current budget?
I guess the difference in number, like the 12 million-ish difference.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Jim.
I know, sorry. So in this number
Yep.
is mathematically correct.
Yeah, right.
But if
right.
we're asking for, in fiscal year 27, for 50 million, I just want to understand that.
In that per pupil spending, I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Cabral, but I don't believe it's just operating spending too. It's using other funding sources as well. And they're just giving an overall, this is what Easton has spent in FY24 per pupil. And that'll change, right?
So the 50 million is what, for 27 is what the town is, from the town budget we're getting, but not, we spend over that from other sources?
Yes, that's correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I just have, oh, sorry, Kelly, you had something? No, go ahead.
It was just on, I think I've asked this before, and I'm going to continue to sort of ask it. We know that there is a lot happening legislatively that we're calling upon to try to address this exact challenge that we're facing, because it changes the playing field for educators, changes the playing field for our district. It's substantial. Once again, I know we as a school committee have the opportunity to take times like the Day on the Hill and speak with legislators and continue to emphasize this. Is there anything else that the community can do to help us?
Absolutely. Any time that people in the community can reach out to Easton's, depending on what district there is, what district they live in, their senators, the House of Representatives, any opportunity they have for, there will oftentimes be different legislators will come in and around Easton to meet with people, to have coffee hours. It's very important, if people are so inclined, to let those legislators know that they are very concerned about Chapter 70 funding formula, the funding formula in particular, but also aspects of the funding formula, like the wage adjustment factor and the different poverty indicators. And now they can add to that the entitlement grants and how that it has potentially will be adversely impacting Easton. These are all really important talking points. At any point, if anybody wants to go, if you log into the State House and you look at bills that are currently under review, you can see different things that are targeting education specifically. And we can always go over, we do it when the chair, for example, or different members of the school committee go to MASC, the Mass Association of School Committee conferences and meetings. We talk about specifically different agenda items that they're working toward and how they might impact Easton specifically, or if they impact Easton specifically. So we do talk about that often. And we also, so one thing that I think I can do is, every year, I have worked with the town administrator, and we send testimony to the legislators on what we specifically are advocating for our district, and we can add that to our website if people want to use the same verbiage or look at some of the items that we're looking at. Absolutely, they can. Anyone who's a voter can contact their delegation members and tell them what is most important to them. And the things that are affecting Easton most right now in terms of education are the making sure the circuit breaker is fully funded, making sure that the minimum aid per pupil is at least $150 going forward every year. The entitlement grants and the way that they used the census to determine who receives those entitlement grants. That's what we were talking about, Title I. And definitely the foundation formula for Chapter 70 funding. Those are huge for Easton, and we've been trying to make headway on those for years. And any advocacy that any groups or delegations or individuals can do on the town's behalf would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just have a couple questions. Thank you for bringing up, Dr. Cabral, the town or the special education fund that we have that was voted on by town meeting, because I wasn't sure what the balance was at that point. So thank you for that. The fiscal year 27 contracted services for out-of-district placements, it says you assume a 2% increase in revenue and a 2.5% increase in expense year after year.
Yes.
But didn't we get like 14% one year and 7% another year? And
I did an average over a period of time.
okay.
And it was a little higher and lower in a couple places, but I just kind of rounded that down to
Okay.
a reasonable number.
Okay.
I didn't want to overinflate the revenue, and I certainly didn't want to underinflate the expense.
Yeah.
So it even might be a little bit more conservative,
Okay.
but I don't think the effect would change much if
Okay.
that went up or down a little bit.
All right, thank you.
The 14% was such an outlier. Over the last 8 years, it's never been over 5%.
Okay.
Except for that one time.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had is, I know with the entitlement grants, do we find out about them? Is it in the summer that we usually find out about them? What's the timing on that?
It varies. We have had years where we found out about what our final payment was going to be literally in August. So it does vary. We don't know when we're going to get it right now, but again, because we're questioning this, I don't know if it will even delay and having a delaying effect on when we're going to hear about it, because hopefully they're going to go back and take a good hard look at this.
Typically, it's in July, but this past year it was in August, like Dr. Cabral had said. But typically, we find out in mid-July what our numbers are.
And what's the status of their transportation contract?
The IFB was, we canceled the IFB. We only got one vendor. So we've turned back to looking at doing an extension with our current provider, and we're working with them on that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you. This was a really helpful presentation.
Great, thank you.
Does anyone else have any last minute questions? No? Okay, so what I would like to do is open this up to members in the audience. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the fiscal year 27 budget? And if you do, just please raise your hand and state your name and address for the record. Yes? If you could state your name and address, that would be great.
I didn't know if I was supposed to get up or.
You
if I
can,
could
wherever
sit.
you're comfortable.
Kathy Millette, 6 Dean Street. So I just wanted to clarify then, from full year 25 to 26, we increased by 3.6% of our overall budget, correct?
Yes.
From the 40. And then this year, we are decreasing by 2.8%. So over the last couple of years, we had a 0.7 increase from this full year 25, correct?
You're right.
Because we went from like 49,745,814,000, and now we are increased to 50,096,817. So I'm just trying to understand how we were able to like not have like all of the reductions that we did last year and be in a decreased percentage. So
not
like,
sure I
so
follow.
last year we
Yep.
cut like around 40 different personnel,
Yes, yep,
and we increased our budget by 3.6%.
yes.
So I'm just like trying to understand how now we're decreasing our overall budget by 2.8%
Yes.
without any teacher reductions.
Because we've normalized it's really, a lot of it revolves around salary and the personnel supplement. Our cost for the personnel is lined up to our actual personnel that we have in the district right now. And we're using those numbers to project forward, which really should have been done in 26 too.
Okay.
That goes back to the 1.79
Right.
variance that we had, the error that was corrected. That accounts for that. And that's why that is going back to the town, because it was money that was used from the stabilization account, which really is considered one-time money. And so now hopefully the town will either, I can't speak for the town, of course, but hopefully they won't have to use stabilization, or they won't have to use as much.
Okay. So there was just an error with a lot of errors.
There was a
within the personnel.
realignment of our budget, of our.
It was in one line, which was personnel.
Were you winking when you said?
I did not wink, I did not wink.
Okay, I'm just trying to I'm not a finance person,
Right.
but doing all this stuff, I've just been very curious about all of it.
Yep.
So I'm trying to just understand how it all kind of came in. So
Does that answer your question? Is that clear?
Yes, so that makes more sense. It seems that now we've kind of flushed that out
Right.
to be where
Yes.
we should have been.
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Do I now? Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question or comment? No. Okay. Okay. Okay, well, thank you for participating tonight. Next item on the agenda is update on the school audit. Dr. Cabral?
Thank you. I'm going to ask Director Spagna to continue by explaining the update on the research that has been done and what is happening going forward.
Okay. Just as the memo I provided to you says, to ensure the districts follow the proper state procurement procedures, the review is being conducted through the Operational Services Division, OSD, which is under state contract PRF 78. This contract is the Commonwealth's master agreement for audit, accounting, compliance, and related services, and provides a compliant framework for soliciting quotes from pre-qualified firms that the state has vetted. In January, the PRF 78 guidance and associated documentation were reviewed to confirm the appropriate procurement steps. During February, the district myself worked directly with Operational Service Division to ensure the proper process and draft of scope of work aligned with the state contract requirements. OSD staff reviewed the scope of work and confirmed that it was properly structured. The scope of work also was reviewed with the school committee budget subcommittee. The subcommittee established a timeline for the project and recommended refinements to the document, which I incorporated into that scope of work before we posted it for quotes. The request for quotes, or RFQ, was posted on Combis, which is the state's site for their vendors, on March 2nd. The system automatically notified selected vendors in alignment with the supplier diversity objectives and all eligible Category 1 vendors under PRF 78 with the supplier diversity program commitment of 10% or greater. We made sure that they were all included in receiving that email and the request for RFQ. The next steps are the response for the RFQs. They're due Monday, the 16th, by 2 p.m. The school committee budget subcommittee is scheduled to meet on March 18th. We might be adjusting that date a little bit to evaluate the submissions. Proposal will be reviewed based on qualifications, relevant experience, proposed approach, timeline, and cost. Following that evaluation, interviews will be scheduled with the selected firms. A recommendation will then be brought forward to the full school committee for consideration and approval. The anticipated timeline for the selected firm to begin work is early April, with a final written report delivered by June 22nd. And of course, we need to work with the firm we select to firm those dates, so there may be some movement in those days. After delivery of the report, the selected firm will present its findings to the school committee. And then we'll just provide additional updates as we go through this process. Hopefully, the next time we meet will be with a recommendation.
Okay.
Okay?
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I do. So you put out this request so I haven't been through this before. So
Yep.
When you put out your request, are there certain parameters you put in? Are you
yes.
looking for like this is the kind of audit we're looking for? This is
Yes.
what the information. Okay, can you give just a summary of what?
Yeah, well, I wish I printed the statement of work. Basically, went into the details of we want a review of FY26 budget preparation, and specifically on the personnel budgeting piece of that, but not just the personnel piece. So we want to know how that budget was prepared. Maybe it can either reinforce or find something that maybe I didn't see as an explanation. I also, in the scope of work, and correct me if I miss anything, is the internal controls that are currently in place within the business office, and what my controls that I'm adding to and plan to add to will do, and get their it's not an opinion, but their evaluation of them to make sure they're proper and they're complete.
Okay.
And then also look at how I prepared the FY27 budget in my supporting documentation and what I use to create that budget to make sure it follows proper guidelines and it's defensible, I guess, is what I would say.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
That's really the main gist of it.
Thank you. That's
Okay.
helpful.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions on that piece? Nope. Okay. Next item, student handbook and codes of conduct updates. Now I know Mr. Davidson has a bunch of presentations. Do you want us to sit there? Do you want us to stay here? Okay.
Sure, that would be great. And you can talk about some of the stuff too. Thank you for having me tonight. The next 4 agenda items are all items that tie directly into our civil rights and special education audit. And so while we're going through the audit, there are some items that have to be brought forward to the school committee before specific dates each year. And some of the items that we're looking at are legal aspects to updates that we have to do across the district in 4 categories. The first one that we're going to present tonight is all around handbook updates. There's going to be a handbook update in all 4 schools to make sure it's aligned with our state regulations when it comes to due process. And so we'll go through those today. The 4 principals and myself worked through this process, came up with common language, and I'm here to present that to you tonight. I was looking for this earlier. So the first slide, there's a long list of items that we have to have up here for our due process for students with disabilities when it comes to suspensions. The major change in this is in orange on the right, and it has to do with the functional behavioral assessment, or an FBA, that would be conducted when appropriate and provide behavioral intervention services to students to create less likely that the behavior would reoccur. And so the language on the right is right from the regulations and the recommendation from the Department of Ed through the audit. What's on the left is all the information that we have in the due process, where we had hyperlinks in some of our handbooks that would share out to our families of what that due process is. The recommendation from our working group is that this would be updated in the handbook. So everything on the left, I know you received that handout, would be updated in all 4 handbooks across the district, so parents and guardians are aware of the due process rights of their students when it comes to suspensions for students with disabilities. The major language update would be on the right when it comes to a functional behavioral assessment. It's actually on the left. It's highlighted on theirs on the left. It just looks different on the slide. The second part that we need to update in the due process and the recommendation from the working group is when we discuss suspensions within our schools. And there's 3 items that we're recommending that we add to the standards for due process that are in all of our handbooks across the district. The first update on this part is recommending alternative remedies that we may use within the district. You can see the examples that are provided in your handouts is around mediation, conflict resolution, restorative justice, and collaborative problem solving. In the handout that you received, that is in yellow. On this part of it, it would be in paragraph 2. That language was just missing from our current handbooks. The second update on this slide is around documentation. And the Department of Ed requires us to document, and you'll hear about that when we go through our discipline data in a little while. But it's just one line that we had to add, which is actually in the second paragraph, the last line, where it discusses principals or designees will document the use and results of the alternative remedies that were offered to the student. And then the last update that we're recommending for this section of the handbook is around re-engaging students in the learning process. And so what the Department of Ed requires from us to meet the regulations is to add all of the different items that we can use as remedies within the school district and what we're currently using, so families understand what might be offered to them in the process during those meetings. And so I'm going to read this portion to you. It's really that first paragraph. But what the major addition is going to be is, in addition, student discipline might be provided not only to hold students accountable for inappropriate behaviors, but also to teach students about their responsibilities for good citizenship. Students may participate in a community service project or other alternative remedy as a means of accountability. Alternative remedies may include, but are not limited to, lunch detention, substance abuse programs, restorative lessons directly related to the offense, structured school days, collaborative problem solving, removal of privileges, and/or referral to outside support. And the example is counseling. That is being recommended from the Department of Ed. This portion of the agenda item is just to notify the school committee of the changes that will be going into the handbook. Our principals are going to bring them back to their building-based teams to recommend that for the update of the handbook. Once that goes live, we'll let the school committee know that the handbooks have been updated, and a communication will go out to our school community, all in alignment with the regulations that we're required to add to the handbook. Any questions on this portion of the agenda? Yes?
What do they mean by a structured school day?
A structured school day might be something like a session that you might meet with a counselor who might provide a restorative lesson. It might be something where you meet with somebody within the office to rebuild a rapport with a staff member or a current student, and your hours change compared to what it typically looks like, and so the structure of your normal day attending classes wouldn't look the same.
Okay, so it's not like an in-school suspension, it's like a chunk of the day where you're doing some mediation or restorative practice or something. Oh, interesting.
Correct.
Okay.
In-school suspension is still a suspension. And so on a Department of Ed website, if it's in school or out of school, it's still marked the same way. This is remedial or an intervention being provided.
Restorative.
Yep.
So I feel like I should know this because I hope it's not intuitive and I'm just not getting it, but what exactly is a lunch detention?
You could break a school rule in one of our schools, and instead of being in lunch for that portion, you might have lunch, I believe, in the office or serve a potential after-school detention for a lunch violation. But typically when we look at lunch detentions, it's during the lunch process, and so you might eat with an assistant principal, you might eat with a counselor, and receive some of those restorative practices during that time.
It could also be with the teacher. So if the teacher says, you know what, instead of going to recess, you're going to stay with me. We're going to work on and talk through what issue may have occurred in the classroom, and I will work on that with you.
Okay, thank you.
That would be by the choice of the teacher, because that's during the structured lunch schedule for the
Yes.
teacher in their contract.
Yep.
It's a very supportive measure that some people do provide.
Okay.
All right. So,
Can I ask one more question on this
Yes.
slide? It's in the middle paragraph, so I was giving it a second. What is restorative justice? Is that like the community service piece? It's in the
We
middle
don't
paragraph.
typically do the community service piece.
Oh.
So restorative justice, restorative practices that you might provide students, educational components to something that might be, say it's a civil rights violation, you might be doing a restorative practice on the history of why that's offensive to a specific subgroup, things like that. So you're really providing that restorative piece.
So you're doing you're providing education to help with the restorative. Okay. Just the word justice threw me off. Sorry, I didn't totally understand that.
Bullying. Yep. Thank you. So this is agenda item number 9. This is bullying and cyberbullying training updates. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to this and what is going to be our physical restraint conversation. But this agenda item is to update the school committee on additional items that are necessary to include in our annual mandated civil rights trainings for our staff. And so each year, our staff reviews the updates to the district procedures and state and federal laws and regulations. Director DiNapoli puts together an unbelievable PowerPoint. Our offices all support her on that and what information needs to be on there. And each year, some of the regulations change. We're going to be updating physical restraint right now to talk about it. And in August, I'm going to bring back another item because that will actually change again on how we use timeout spaces within the district. And so first day of school or right before the first day of school, Director DiNapoli sends out an entire presentation to our staff that needs to be reviewed every single year, every single employee in the district. We're only going to talk about the physical restraint piece tonight and the bullying piece tonight. And so the next few slides, really a keynote to have before we get into them, is that a few years ago, DESE started requiring specific information in the presentations. And a joint project for the Governor's Task Force on Hate Crimes, the Massachusetts Commission on Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Youth, and the Mass Department of Public Health created an unbelievable resource guide for school districts. And so a lot of the information tonight that we have to provide in our slides in the future are around research-based methods and a lot of data points that they did a lot of work on. And so we're gonna go over the slides that are being updated. In your packets that you received, I gave you the whole section of bullying training. We're only gonna go over the slides that were updated. And so we are gonna jump, I love this. We're gonna skip over to slide 70. And here is really where it starts, and it talks about the research that informs this guide. And this is all from the Department of Ed. Really excited about going through that handbook and looking at it. And you can see the traditional research on social emotional learning and the best practices within the field, but then also the knowledge that we took from the Department of Ed and the joint project that was done by Laura Parker and David Rudrick and Donald Gordon. And they produced this awesome guide to bullying prevention. The next slide that would be updated is around the most targeted youth. And we see the research informs our staff that physically vulnerable is the number one risk factor. Bullying goes beyond the physical differences, but the social-emotional dynamics center on perceived power and balance. And the research states the bullies strategically targeted systemic inequalities. And so when we look at it, the research is based down there. What the Department of Ed is recommending is providing this information to our staff and then the research behind it that they can all go and read the article that was written. So that's where the regs have changed a little bit in the annual training that we're conducting. When we go through this, we talk about where it occurs, and you see it's typically around less structured times, especially at our younger levels. You're going to look at, some obvious areas, the playground and recess, waiting to get on the school bus, dismissal times, hallways, cafeterias. Of course, it's going to happen in the classroom too, but it's typically when adults are not present. Our teachers, our staff are always present, but the small working groups and things like that. But you can see the less structured times and the less supervised times is typically when you see the bullying occurring. And so that information is all within the presentation from the Department of Ed. From there, we'll jump over to slide 74, and it's appropriate strategies to prevent the bullying. And there's an outline around it, and it ties directly into our strategic plan and what we're working on as a school district, really around creating emotional and physically safe schools for our students to operate in, and our staff. And the study behind that shows that school districts that have that culture of supporting each other and the expectations for how to treat each other show less bullying occurring within their buildings over the years. And so the research will be shared right with our staff. They can click on it. They can go into the information on how to create those safe buildings for their students to operate in. And so the Department of Ed really, again, recommends using their document that came out to share with our staff. The next one is around strategies used and how we're creating those emotional and physical safe schools, but the strategies and warning signs to effectively intervene in these situations. And so I won't read them all to you because one of the things that I struggle with is when someone reads the entire slide, but I think some that you should be aware of is symptoms of depression, such as withdrawal, bouts of anger, other emotional outbursts, a new route to school, so they're avoiding certain students on their way. That could be on the bus, that could be not taking the bus, that could be a way they walk to school, taking a different path. And then, sudden requests for a change in classes and things like that. But you'll see all the research here ties back right to that document that was shared out. All right, and the last is just recommendations for our staff on how to respond to bullying. Again, 10 great ways to do that, but an example is validating the child's right to a physical and emotionally safe place to be educated. You have the right to feel emotionally and physically safe at school. It will help you be sure that you feel that way within school. Give assurances that there's nothing wrong with the target. You've done nothing to deserve this. If the bullies, it's the bully who's at fault, and we'll work through that together. So it gives our staff research-based methods to support students that might be being bullied, and then also some of our parents will be able to see some of this information and help them guide through it. So those are the updates within our bullying part of the presentation tonight, and updates that you needed to be aware of that will change in our staff training at the start of next year.
Any questions on this? Okay.
All right. Student discipline data. Awesome. So future Dr. Pruitt, myself, and the assistant principals within the district built a PowerPoint to go over student discipline data. We then brought it to our cabinet, which is our district-wide admin and our building principals, to go through it. And then we're here to present a high 30,000-foot view of our discipline and what we've been working on. I think we shared out last year at least the approach to how we're taking in the information on incidents within the district. And we really wanted to talk about those tonight. And so we're here to walk the school committee through the student discipline data presentation from information from the 2025-2026 school year. One that reflects our deep commitment to creating safe and supportive and equitable learning environments for every student in our district. Tonight's presentation will walk you through the school-based trends, district-wide data, and areas of continued focus as we move together. To frame what you'll see tonight, I want to briefly orient you with the three areas that the presentation will cover. First, we'll speak about the district alignment work that's going on. This is to ensure that our reports of incidents, documented behaviors, and applied restorative practices are in alignment across all 4 of our schools. Consistency matters, especially for our families and students, and for the integrity of the data that we're working with. The second piece is we'll highlight some key considerations. One is this is the first year of implementation of several new initiatives within our district. One, which is including our data platform that we're utilizing, which is Open Architects. I know Mrs. Pruitt has talked about that a few times here, and we're very happy to be using this information and being able to guide some of our data points tonight. A second is realigning our MTSS and whole child reviews across the district. So we are doing the same approach in each of our buildings to be able to support kids. Staff were trained on that in the fall, actually on both areas, which was the Open Architect training that we had early on, and then also the MTSS changes that we went through as a district. And it's important that the committee understands that this data is really in the context of a high-level perspective of what we're sharing out tonight. Our goal in the future is to meet with you and really dive into key points that you'll see tonight and some of the ways that we're going to attack those key points in the future. And then finally, how it connects back to our strategic plan and the way we are committed to regularly analyzing the student data and maintaining safe and supportive environments in all of our buildings. So the school-based updates is where we'll start. And when we moved into the school-based data, this section really examines the common trends that we saw. And so when we met with the assistant principals, we took exactly their 3 high-level trends that they saw. We aligned them with each other and saw what the overall 3 common themes were, and we wanted to be able to present that here tonight. What we are looking at was the patterns that can help us understand where incidents are happening, who is involved, and what systemic responses may be most effective. I want to acknowledge up front that the goal of sharing this data is not to alarm anyone in the audience tonight, but it's to inform and ensure that our interventions are strategic and grounded in the evidence.
If I can just add also, when we look at data, it tells a story. And it's really important to have that story and ask questions. And that's exactly what happened on Tuesday when we shared this with the cabinet, with our leadership team, because there were so many questions that came about, and it left us saying, wait, is this telling the right story? Where are the outliers? And that's the purpose of analyzing data, is letting us look at where do we need to firm things up further, and where do we need to analyze things, or how do we need to analyze things differently?
So the first slide here you'll see is the locations of incidents. And one of the clearest and most consistent findings across all of our districts is that the number one place is it within our classrooms. And we understand that was going to be the common theme. This is true across all of our buildings. But where we start to see the data change is really around our elementary schools and those unstructured transition times within the buildings. And for us, we're seeing that at recess and gym, the bus, and the hallways. These are all hotspot locations that we're looking into. These are the moments when adult supervision is lower, which aligns with the bullying data that was shared out in our last slide deck. And then what are the student behavior trends that we need to look at during those less structured times? What are the common themes when we come back to talk about what is happening at recess? What types of infractions are happening? And what are we doing about that to create a safer environment? The action item emerging from our data is to review our Tier 1 PBIS supports across the district. PBIS is our positive behavioral interventions and supports. It's our structure that we really utilize K through 8 with a specific focus on classroom level supports. We're seeing a lot of these incidents that are being reported happening in the classroom. And if the classroom incidents are up, what are we doing to prevent that situation? What preventative measures and supports can we put in place for our staff and for our students to be able to operate at the highest of their levels? We want our classroom teachers to be equipped with everything that they need to be able to do what they're hired to do, and that's to teach our students. When we jump into the next slide.
Can I ask a question on that slide before?
Absolutely.
There's nothing listed for recess for BA. Is that because there truly are no incidents at recess, or are they folding into the classroom because of the way recess occurs at BA?
Yep. One of the things that we're looking at is how we're documenting the incidents that are occurring. And so that's a great question. And so if it's an indoor recess, where is it getting listed? Are we looking at it as who's reporting it? What happens is for our incident reports, it's getting reported back from our recess aides to our staff, who are then uploading it. And so that's one of the data points that we wanted to talk about and dive deeper into. Is that off because our classroom teacher might be putting the incident report in versus a recess aide?
And what is being documented and what isn't being documented. So these are conversations we're having and we're calibrating. That was we met with the assistant principals this morning, and we talked a lot about calibrating what is being inputted. There's also lists of what are expected and unexpected behaviors. When should something get logged? When is something not necessarily going to be logged? There's some inconsistencies. So we are working on that with them, and also working on that with the assistant principals, but then the assistant principals will be able to work with our staff for clear expectations around what should be documented, what doesn't need to be documented, so forth and so on. So we need to have real clear procedures, and that is something that we are working on currently with our assistant principals.
Are you also looking at data about who's reporting it, whether it's like a classroom teacher versus a student versus a parent?
Yeah, and the other, just to jump back to this data in particular, we only took the top 3 locations. So recess may have been at Bland James, for example, but it didn't have as many instances as the others. So it doesn't mean that there was 0 reporting. We only took the top 3. And as far as who's reporting it, we do have to put that, that is being logged. If parents are reporting it, it's still being logged by a teacher or someone in the school.
Parent is going to the
Correct.
teacher and the teacher is coming back.
Right.
And one key factor that's taken into consideration is the data that you're going to see tonight. And I probably should have said this earlier, is what's in Aspen.
Correct.
Okay, so if we were all teachers within the school, there could be incidents that are occurring in my room where I'm reporting it versus Chrissy's room where she might not be reporting it. And that's part of our alignment work to make sure our staff's educated on what goes into the system to our admin and what the expectations are around that, but also how we work through that data once we get it and how we're logging it, right? Because one of the things that we're finding, and this is where we didn't want to go with it, but we don't want to dive too deep into this because this would be a future agenda item, is around how we're coding it, right? And how we're deciding which locations are. So we're not in alignment yet. This work really started heavily last year with Director Perez and the assistant principals within the buildings, and we started aligning that work, and we're still seeing some areas that we're going sideways with, and then we need to pull back in and make sure that we're coding it the right way.
One of the big things, for example, is a list so you could see what is being reported. For example, tardy to class at the high school is something that is in this data. And, so I may report, Director Davidson being late to my class, but Christina may not report it.
Yeah.
So that's where there's some inconsistencies.
Okay.
But that's the purpose of gathering data, is to really look at, not to say this teacher isn't doing that or this teacher isn't doing that, but what are we reporting? What is necessary to report? Why? What is the purpose of reporting it? It's because we want to get our students back into class. We don't want them to be late, for example. Student X might be late a lot to my class, but not late a lot to another class, and what are the reasons for that? So it's really trying to identify and prioritize what's best for the students.
Member
Sorry.
Hamilton?
I have kind of an A and B. I'm assuming it's one incident long. This is kind of like one incident per student.
Yes.
Is there a sense of like getting ahead of ourselves, like repeat offenders versus?
Yep. And that when we start to talk about some of the other items coming up, we'll talk about that piece. Member Prowler?
I have just a question about, do you use majors and minors in your matrix with Tier 1 PBIS, or is that what you're trying to get to in order to differentiate between tardy to class and getting in a fight? Like,
Yes.
those are not the same thing, but they're being captured in the same place. here.
Absolutely. And this is every incident that occurred in our building so far, in all of our buildings. And so there could be anything from a suspension to a restorative practice to a warning to a
Right.
let's talk about this.
And also, they spend 99.9% of their day in the classroom.
Exactly.
So it only makes sense that the vast majority of times where they get themselves into a little mischief is going to be in the classroom versus other areas of the school.
100%. Exactly. Great point.
Member Percio?
Back to my question about BA and the recess element. Is there a potential that part of the reason you're also not seeing it for recess is that the children don't fully understand how to report themselves, like incidents that occur at recess? So if a classmate is bullying them or pushes them or something happens, by the time recess is over and they go through lunch, they don't necessarily report it because but then it might come out later and they might be bothered by it, but we're not always necessarily seeing that where another child has more awareness of how to report something that happens to them.
Yeah. And we're also in the very early stages of really starting to utilize OpenArc and what it can do and how it can help us with some of these questions. And so we're excited about the work ahead. We're meeting every other week with the assistant principals, and this is one of the continuous items on our agenda, at least for the last month. And so we can't wait to continue that work as we go and be able to continue communicating that out with our stakeholder groups. So they have a better understanding at home of what might be a call home to them or what might come home from the teacher versus an admin.
Yeah, and what we're finding is in conversations with the assistant principals is in some schools, they have actual documents of, what a level 1 behavior might be versus level 2 versus level 3, when a child might be sent to the office for a particular reason when they wouldn't be. What's expected to be dealt with in the classroom, what's expected to go to an administrator for something to deal with. But we're still working on it because while they may have the document, we have to make sure that it's being communicated to all the teachers and the teachers fully understand what those documents are and how that data is being collected. For one more thing, I'm sorry. It's also very developmental. So a kindergartner sticking up their middle finger, for example, may be very different than an eighth grader sticking up their middle finger. And the kindergartner sticking up their middle finger, it may not get logged because they may not think that it just means a number versus the intent of it. So there's so many variables that come into play with data and with discipline data. So just to put that out there.
And I will leave Ms. Pruitt up to giving all the examples of some of the situations that might happen in a school. So, student populations and incident events by race. And so when we look at this, this is a chart, and again, I think it's just the way this looks up here. But what you see is a comparison on the left of each bar in blue is the percentage of students in that category. And so if you look at the first bar on the left, that is students that identify themselves as white within our district. And so when you look at the data point there, what's in orange is the incidents that are documented for students in that subgroup and the difference between it. And so the chart compares what percentage of our students, student body each group represents, alongside what percentage of disciplinary incidents have occurred throughout the school year. For the most racial ethnic groups, the data shows relative alignment between enrollment share and the incident rates. These figures reflect reasonable within a 5 to 7% swing of the student population to incident percentages. When we look at it, a key component that we need to consider when we're looking at this chart is that we started to transition our enrollment packets last year, and Director Ramos explained to me how this impacts this slide. And so when you look at it, one of the bars up there is around students that are blank or unreported in a category. And that percentage is a large percent. There's about 9% of our incidents are students where they weren't fully enrolled in the old packets, the paper packets. It was left blank. And so there's a swing in some of these categories that could happen, and that's something we want to continuously look at. What we're seeing is that's not an option when you now enroll through Aspen online. And so there's not an unreported section to that or option anymore. And so our data will continue to tighten as we go. We are committed to the fair and consistent disciplinary practice for all students, and this data will continue to be reviewed as we strengthen our documentation and reporting processes when we report out to all of you. When we go to the next slide, I should probably let Mrs. Pruitt report out on this because it hits home with me a little bit as a former male high school student. But when we go to the next slide, there's too many buttons. We're going to look at gender population versus incident distribution. And so this is the same way it was set up. In the last slide, in the green, you are going to see incidents per student that are represented for our male population in green. The students in pink that are being reported are the female population. Our non-binary students did not make up a large enough population sample within the reports and it could be too identifiable, so that population is not represented here. So the numbers might not equal to 100%. But what you can see, and it's aligned with state and national data, is a discrepancy. Significantly overrepresented for our male population. Across all 4 buildings, male students' population is around 50 to 54% of our student population. You're going to see 65 to 82% of the incidents occurring in our buildings are the male population that are being reported. This is a pattern not only in Easton, it reflects a broader national trend. As I just said, the Department of Education shared the suspension rates previously, and in 2023, students of the male population doubled suspension rates compared to the female population within our state. We continuously will be looking at this. This is a pattern we're taking seriously, and it raises important questions that we talked about in both of our meetings with our assistant principals and with our building principals around the supports necessary to support the male population, also the relationships and interventions that may be happening, but also how we're teaching and how we're really keeping the students engaged within the lessons that are going on, and how we teach some of those skills in those unstructured times too. Any questions on this slide? the numbers are staggering on this slide. When we get into our educational groups, this slide really examines the disciplinary data through the lens of student classifications. And so you'll see on the far left is general education students. The next bar is around students that are currently on IEPs. The third bar is around English language learners. And then the fourth bar are students that are both considered an English language learner and a student with an IEP. General education students make up 78.3% of our student population and account for the majority of incidents in raw numbers, but which you would expect, given that they're the largest group. However, the more significant number here is what we see with students with IEPs. So students on IEPs currently represent 17.9% of the student population. And yet we're seeing at each of the schools, it's really disproportionate in the numbers that are being reported in this segment. When we look deeper at the numbers, and this was a question I think one of you started to bring up, out of the student population, we're looking at some buildings that are above 30%, 50% of the incidents being reported. Only 25% of students on IEPs have had an incident reported through our portal. And so there are some repeat offenders when we look at the data points that we're going to take a deeper dive into and how we're reporting that data and how we're documenting it within each building so we are in alignment. An example of that could be, if I'm a teacher in one building and I'm working on a behavior plan, am I putting some of that information into Aspen versus a teacher in another building that might be documenting it in our ACE software, where we do some of our discrete trials and some of the information goes into that. And so that's some of that alignment work that we're currently working on, not only with our admin team, but also we're working with our program staff across the board in all of our programs on how we're collecting data points.
And if I was just going to say that's why this data is so important, because it's because of this data that we were able to dig deeper and ask those questions. And it brought up, I remember in the conversation with the assistant principals saying, oh my goodness, this is where the discrepancies are. And this is why we need to have these calibrations, because the teacher at this school isn't reporting it, but the teacher at this school is, and which is right and which shouldn't, which one shouldn't we do, or what is best for the student, and how are we documenting to help the student progress in their skills. And those are the conversations that we're having through this. So that's really, really important. This data, I guarantee you, the next time we report it will change, because there will be more of that calibration occurring.
I'm sorry, we can't hear on the Zoom.
Whether the incident was a manifestation of their disability, and whether it's called for in the IEP, whether the IEP is being followed, so does any of that fall within this, or is this just raw data?
This is just raw data at this point, and that's some of the deeper conversations that we want to have across the board. Without diving too deep into it and just looking at these numbers, but one of the things that really stuck out to us was we use the word truancy if you're late to class. That's how we're coding it. Truancy at the middle school and high school could be 1 minute late, 5 minutes late, however it looks to that class if you're in attendance. Our truancy numbers really skew the data. And so when we started to take a deeper dive and we started to pull back and say, no, we're going to do the 30,000 foot view first, our next presentation will really dive into some of those codes that we're seeing that are really through the roof, and how do we work on that.
Okay.
We haven't seen that. I've been here a few years, and I had to really rely on Mrs. Pruitt and Dr. Cabral for understanding a little bit more of the data. When we started looking at it, we have the ability to start diving into those data points. And I love Director Spagna when he goes, some things take a couple hours to get done because our systems are old. Open Architect can do it in seconds. When we had to do this previously, it was hours of time, because you're pulling out the information. And then you're going from, okay, we're going to take it, and Director Ramos was so proud because I called it a CSV file, but you're downloading it into a spreadsheet, which then you have to update it to match Google if you want to work off Google so everyone can see it, and then you're maneuvering it, and then you got to, it's 1975 when we're looking at our system. But now when we're looking at using OpenArc, it's allowing us to do it instantly, and we were able to do that with the assistant principals, and then it got to the point where we had to come back to what we wanted to present tonight. But
Okay.
future presentations, we're really going to take a dive into what is driving some of these numbers
Okay.
and that alignment work and some goals to match our strategic plan in the future.
Okay, great, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. District-wide reporting. About 5 years ago, the state really changed how we're reporting out data. And so around 5 years ago, it became a requirement to not only track and report both bullying and civil rights investigations, but also what ended up in findings. All right. Previously, if we labeled it bullying in our system, that was what was reported to the state. That's what they were running their numbers off of. I want to say it was 5 years ago when they switched it. It was right around it was during COVID that they switched it over to both those categories. And so when we're going to talk about this today is I know that you originally received packets that had the individual schools. Tonight you'll see the district-wide numbers because it was identifiable when you looked at the schools situation. And so when we look at it here around district bullying investigations for this year, we've had 7 bullying investigations district-wide that ended in 4 resulted with a finding of bullying. And as a reminder, Mass law defines bullying as a repeated use of written, verbal, or electronic expression or a physical act or gesture directed at a victim that causes harm, creates fear or harm, creates a hostile school environment, infringes on the victim's rights, and disrupts the educational process. When a finding of bullying is made, the district is required to take action, and that's in our bullying prevention plan that is on our school website, our district website, and is a school committee policy. And so when we look at these numbers, all 4 findings have been addressed in accordance with the district policy and state law. And so when we're looking at these numbers, we're required to really take into consideration anytime bullying is reported. We can then work with whoever reports it on identifying, are we using the term the right way, the definition of bullying the right way, and then taking a look at that. So when we talk about investigations, that's the full investigation, the large process, setting up supports for not only the alleged target, but the alleged aggressor, and going through our district-wide policy that we operate in. We have a lot more reporting of bullying, but when we start to work with either the family that reports it or the student, if it's a single situation, we don't label it as a bullying investigation. And so then we start to go back into a school investigation. So currently we've had 7 bullying investigations and 4 findings this year. You want to add? All right. When we jump over to the civil rights investigations, there have been 23 civil rights investigations conducted this year. How a civil rights investigation is conducted is when it's reported that a potential civil rights violation happens, our assistant principals or any building administrator reach out to my office. We start the process. There's no difference in the investigation piece for our civil rights investigations. It's just that the civil rights process creates more support opportunities for the alleged targets and the alleged aggressor during the investigation. But it's a typical school investigation. It's labeled as civil rights because it falls under the state regs. And then the findings lead to different next steps. And so when we look at it, the state and federal law protect the right of every student in Massachusetts to attend school free from violence, threats, intimidation, and harassment. And the Attorney General's office works with districts to support safe educational environments. We wanted to be transparent with the committee tonight on the 23 investigations is a number we are taking very seriously. That creates a hostile environment for students within our district. We're examining what is driving these investigations and what protected categories are where the incidents are happening. And so that will be a future information that we share out in presentation with this committee on what subgroups are in those numbers a little bit larger than we would like. And so when we look at that, that will inform support that we provide students and programming that we provide our buildings across the board. And we're committed to keeping you informed of the information that we're receiving and really breaking down those numbers. As you can see, 23 have been reported. We've had 11 findings as civil rights violations this year within the school district. Any questions on that? Yes.
Hi, what type of remedies, like just a couple examples of remedies exist for the 11 cases where we did find a violation of someone's civil rights?
I think the most glaring data point for me, and I know when I have a civil rights situation going on, Dr. Cabral and Ms. Pruitt are aware of it, that we're working with the buildings. I think the most glaring data point for me is it's typically students that are considered friends with each other this year, and that's a data point I haven't seen before in previous districts when I was a civil rights coordinator. And what we're seeing is like we're doing a lot of restorative work afterwards because these students are in the same classes, in the same friend group, hang out as families outside of school. And part of it, I don't want to throw out non-research items to you, but I think there's just there's more information being provided and more things that our students are seeing on a day-to-day basis outside of school through social media, through different movies that they might be watching. And we're starting to see the impact within our school buildings. And our therapeutic staff are working extremely hard on supporting students when these situations arise, and then putting the pieces back together afterwards. And there's a lot of restorative work going on. And that's the glaring number that's shocking to me. I can't give you the exact number out of what's up there, but that is a few of the findings that we've had. And then you're working with families to repair that situation too, because the families are involved in these investigations now. And so that's something that we're closely monitoring within our schools.
Thank you.
And that's all I have for the discipline data update. Any questions? All right. We're on to the easiest one. Physical restraint training. Yes, it was in the second email. You just freeze it. Yep. All right. So our physical restraint guidance that we, again, working with Director DiNapoli on, that we provide our staff at the beginning of the year, needed a few language updates and then access points for our staff to be able to see when they're trained. And so the first update is on this page, and it's really around the interventions recommended before a restraint. In our training, we did not have this one line. It's actually the first bullet on the second part. And it talks about the interventions that we work with, and this is research-based. What happens is, and when Mrs. Pruitt and I were going over these presentations, our staff that goes through safety care receive this information in their hands. These are the recommended items that we use. This is on our reporting form that you'll see in a few minutes that our staff use when they report any restraint to me or any incident to me. They have to talk about the interventions that they utilize within those moments. It wasn't on the whole staff training. And so that was the one bullet that we had to add to our overall training. Any questions on this slide? All right. When we jump into this is 2 items that we had to add. The first is actually the restraint incident report. What we did was we actually took how it's reported to the Department of Ed and created a reporting document for our staff to use. And so anytime a physical restraint happens within our district, you have to fill out this form. It gets shared with me right away. Also a phone call from either the special ed coordinator or the building principal typically, and then that form comes to me. By state regs, if there's an injury to a staff member, I have to update the DESE portal within 3 business days. If there's not, I have to do it by the close of June 30th, the fiscal year. And so the incident report has to be shared with the entire staff. Typically, it was only shared with our staff that conduct any of the trainings or take part in any of the trainings or conduct any of some of the physical restraints we use. Now it has to be shared with all staff so they're aware of what that document looks like. The second is just information that we had to report out to the state. It's a hyperlink. And what that is our restraint prevention and behavioral support policy. The school committee, that is, JFAA. I believe, or JKAA. It's JKAA. And so our physical restraint policy lays out federal regs within it. What the rest of that information is around procedures. Some of the important items on that link that our staff needs to be aware of is around how we engage families in the process and how we support them. Every staff member needs to know that our families are notified that day that a restraint happens. The regs give us a little bit more time, but as a district, we call that day. So one of our staff members do that. On the restraint report, you actually see where they sign off that they called home or communicated with the family or invited them in for a meeting. And it actually shows what happened, either a phone call, in-person meeting, or email exchange, and then they're able to document that. We need to update our whole staff on those processes. We've never done that. Typically, we talk about that in our safety care trainings. Our next updates is around items that are prohibited within schools. And so seclusion is prohibited. Seclusion is removing a student from their educational classroom and physically not allowing them to get back in. And so how that looks typically within the state when a student is identified as seclusion is if they're in a room or a timeout space and they're not allowed out. So the door's held on them, they're not allowed to leave, and they are completely secluded from the rest of the general population of the school. Timeout is not prohibited, but it falls under that category because you can see that timeout regs are, seclusion does not include timeout as defined in the regulations because the timeout processes, it's a little bit different, and that's also going to change in August. There's going to be new timeout regs within the state. A prone restraint is not allowed anywhere within the state. I think we all know why, but that's really when you're physically putting a student face down on the ground and physically holding them in that position. And the third is a medication or mechanical restraint. That's going back some time. There are some medication restraints that are allowed within the state. We do not use any within the Easton Public Schools. These three items are always talked about in our safety care trainings. They were never shared out with our overall staff. That's changed in the regs. Our last time we had the audit, none of these were potential findings because they were not in the regs that needed to be shared out with the entire staff. And then that was it, actually. Those are the updates that our staff will need to go through. And that concludes my presentations tonight.
Does anyone have any questions, comments?
There's no
Thank
need for a
you.
vote. It's just updates to everybody.
Thank you for providing all that information. It was very
Thank you.
helpful. All right, why don't we head back to the table?
Thanks.
Okay. Are we good? Okay. Next item on the agenda, schedule of payments. We signed warrants 068S, 069S, 070S, 072S, 073S. Next item is public comment. If any members of the public here in person wish to make a comment, please raise your hand and you will be invited to do so. Please state your name and address for the record. All remarks should be addressed to the full committee through the chair. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to state their comment, and we will allow for a total of 15 minutes. Public comment period is not a time for debate or for the school committee to respond to those comments. We welcome you to email us any questions or additional comments. Ladies? I had my 15 seconds. No more? Okay, no public comment. Okay, superintendent notes, Dr. Cabral.
Okay, I only have a couple. I was going to talk about the bus bid, and I'm sure others will talk about the musical and events. So I will leave that for you. The two things I will say are that you know that we are members of the Bi-County Collaborative, and as the representative of the Easton Public Schools, I am on the board and wanted to update you that Jean Sullivan, who is the executive director, is retiring, and the board has moved to offer the position to Carolyn Lyons, who is the former, or will be the former superintendent of Middleborough Public Schools. So an update for BICO. And then the only other thing I have is that this is the last school committee meeting before Mrs. Pruitt defends her dissertation. So of course we all want to wish her well. That is going to be next Thursday. I am confident that it's going to go without a hitch. And so the next school committee meeting, we will be addressing her as Dr. Pruitt.
Thank you.
So is that how it works? Like as soon as you defend?
No, actually, my chair has told me that I'm not allowed to be called doctor until I graduate. Because it is, there's a whole thing about actually your degree is officially confirmed as they hand you the diploma and the passing of the
When's the
diploma.
graduation?
May 18th, which is town, which is a town meeting, which unfortunately I will not be at because I will be at my graduation.
I don't blame you. Yeah.
And those are EC rules and not EPS rules.
Correct.
So fortunately, the school committee does not have such a policy, so we will be referring to you as Dr. Pruitt.
Thank you.
Okay. Assistant Superintendent notes, Mrs. Pruitt.
So I've been a little busy, so no, I'm kidding. No, the only thing actually that I was going to update you on was the Title I funding. So that has been covered. So I don't have anything at this time. And there have been so many amazing events going on, which I'm sure you'll all cover, like Dr. Cabral said. But I do just want to say that this is the last year that my own child will be in a public high school because he's moving on and graduating. So it was very fun to have Oliver Ames play Whitman Hanson in the girls' basketball game. Unfortunately, I actually was rooting for Oliver Ames, and it's too bad that they did lose, but they did it with grace and with, from what I hear, the fans were fantastic. Unfortunately, I was not able to be there because I did have to attend something else, but it was, my son reported throughout the entire game about how great Oliver Ames was, and so I just wanted to report that and say that I will miss that rivalry in my own house, but I'm excited to be a full-blown OA Tiger fan from now on.
Nice.
After baseball season.
Yeah. That's it?
That's it.
Okay. School committee notes. Kelly, I can start with you tonight.
I don't have any to cover. We've spent quite a bit of time in various committee meetings, much of which you saw through the discussions on budget and the audit work that's been done. So that's been a big thing. And I've been traveling a lot for work, so I haven't been in a lot of the events, so I'll let you all talk to those.
Thank you. Colleen?
So I did get a chance to go to the art show right before we came in here, and you were absolutely correct. It was beautiful. The flowers were gorgeous. The art was absolutely amazing. So kudos to everybody involved in that whole project. Like, I really was trying to figure out how I could steal some of them home with me, but I refrained it. My front on that. And then I also just wanted, the Human Rights Committee is having a workshop that's pretty timely on the 21st. And it's called Better Conversations, Better Connections, Navigating Differences with Confidence. So it's a 90-minute workshop, and it's being sponsored by Human Rights Committee, but it's also, it'll be at the Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, and there's a partnership with Easton Interfaith Clergy, the Old Colony Y, the Ames Free Library, the Easton Republican Town Committee, the Easton Democrat Committee, and Raising Multicultural Kids, because we all live in this little small town and may not all see eye to eye, but we all have to, go to basketball games and stand with each other at the deli line and Big Y. So it's a good way for us to just converse.
Great. Lauren?
I, this weekend, went and saw the OA musical of 9 to 5, which was absolutely amazing. It is always mind-blowing to me how talented the students are, and the actors, the orchestra, just everything is just so well done. And if you missed it, it is now on ECAT, so you can watch it. And I actually watched it this afternoon. So that's all I have.
Jim?
Nothing really for me right now.
Okay. So I just have one quick thing. As you may know, we have a new town administrator. Her name is Liz Dennehy, and she is an Easton resident, and she is the current town administrator in Plimpton. They're going through negotiations now. She has also worked as the Director of Community and Economic Development in Walpole, and the Planning Director and Environmental Affairs Officer in Fall River. Her interview with the Select Board is on ECAT if anyone wants to watch, and we extend our congratulations to her and look forward to our work together. So we're excited for them. So if there's nothing else, I will make a motion to enter into executive session, not to return to open session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy session in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the EEA, Units A and C, and in my opinion, having this discussion in open session would be detrimental to the bargaining position of the school committee, and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with open meeting law and review executive session minutes of January 6, 2026, and January 8th, 2026. Do I have a second?
Percio, second.
Roll call vote.
Percio, yes?
Wiseman, yes?
Loomis, yes.
Hamilton, yes.
Okay. Thank you all. Good night.